Well, good evening and welcome to another episode of Equilibrium Live. I am Sarah Téibo and today I'm joined with some amazing guests. I'm really excited about today's episode, actually. Right, just a slight technical hitch. Welcome to Equilibrium Live. I am Sarah Téibo, and I'm super duper excited about the guest that we have today and the topic that we're going to be discussing today. Now, if you've been following for the last few weeks, we've been trying to talk about different topics, tackling different issues that Christian and gospel creatives may struggle with. We've gone through radio submission, through the knowledge gap, through social media, and today we're going to be talking about the production process. Now, learning about how to make and break records. And today I'm really excited by the guys that I'm joined with today. And before I even start telling you about who they are, can I just ask you, if you're joining on Facebook or YouTube, please share this link with somebody, particularly if you know a creative who could benefit from these conversations. Bring your questions. I've already started getting questions on Instagram and Facebook. I'm going to be sharing some of these questions as well. I genuinely think it's going to be an exciting, information-packed session. So my guests today, I have, starting from the top, I have Jude, aka Judah. I was asking him and literally saying, what exactly is your name? Is it Jude or Judah? But he's a producer. Actually, all the guys on today's platform are producers, and he's also a creative director. He does things like New Rivers TV and Hest Live, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. And you're going to tell us a bit more about yourself. That's just an overview of who you are. And in addition to telling us a bit more about yourself, if you could be a superhero, let us know who that would be and why. Over to Gozi, who is laughing because he's probably thinking about what superhero he's going to be. He's also a producer, a creative director, a songwriter, working on my album with me as well, and overall nice guy. And he's going to tell us a bit more about himself as well. And he'll also tell us about the superhero he'd love to be if he had the chance. Moving on to Paul, also known as Wyld. He is also a producer and an independent artist. And I really feel like just this entire mix of, you know, not just producer, but something else on the side is really, really cool for you guys. So Paul is also going to tell us a bit more about himself. And of course, if he could be a superhero, what or who that would be. So starting with Judah, please tell us a bit more about yourself and your preferable superhero character.
Superhero. Okay, let's start with superhero. I think. Well, can I make up one, or it has
Sure,
to be
why not?
something that's out? I would like the power or whatever it is to give other people superhero powers.
Okay, that is interesting.
Yeah,
You want to be invincible, basically.
yeah. Be able to give other people the power to do things. You know.
That's actually an
Yeah,
interesting one. You want to be an empowering person, like a catalyst.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. A bit like that. So yeah, I'm a producer. Whatever that comes with arranging, seeing the project through, um, involving as well, mixing, a bit of mixing, and I have a group, the New Rivers group. So we have the worship leaders bit of it, and then we've got the creatives, which is the music, the video director, producers, and all these other stuff. And yeah, we also do events, Hazard Live as well, which basically we bring in artists not so established or whatever. It's just people that can, people that just want to do acoustic sessions, and we just give them an opportunity to record a good video with good audio and just put it out there, because we just found a need for that, because there were so many people that wanted opportunity to be able to put themselves out there but they didn't have the finance. So we thought we'll put that in place. We're also working on some films, Christian films and other things like that. Yeah, so that's basically what I
Really
do, and I
exciting.
work with a lot of people. Yeah.
I think you're already kind of doing your superpower thing by all the things that you've said. So that's really cool. Enabling other people to live their dreams. Gozi.
Yeah.
Hey, Now this superhero thing has got me stumped, man. I'm like, like I do love a bit of everything. But if I had to pick one, like based on the guys we know, I think I'll go for Batman.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Because he's very strategic. Like, I mean, we have this thing in our house when we talk about Superman, and we're like, oh, Superman, you're so strong, so powerful, but every time you fly into kryptonite, kryptonite is like, it's not good for you, but you somehow find your way there all the time. That's not very smart behavior. And I think because he's so strong, he doesn't have to think strategically about too many things.
Fair enough.
So I love strategy. So I think I'll go for Batman. And also, like, the great thing, he's also a teacher. He's got Robin and stuff like that. And then he's got this like car with gadget. I love cars. Like, I'm like, yeah, I have my car, souped up car, and everything, and I have people around me that I have to show stuff to, and also I need a team, to work. So I think that kind of probably will be like my sweet spot, really, if I had to pick one anyway. But I do like Iron Man a little bit, but he's a bit too, out there and risque a little bit,
He is
but,
indeed,
yeah. But about me, I'm a music architect. That's the easiest way to.
What does that mean?
Yeah, I know. It's. I think it's the best conversation opener I ever got, and it was a gift from my wife. I would say she's an author, and it's just because I do so many different things within the music industry. And I think in your intro, Sarah, you said it, and I was like, oh, wow, I've never heard that one before. Put it that way. But when it comes to music, I do so many things. I am a songwriter. I'm a producer. I am a musician as well. I'm not just, and I did touring and, all that stuff for a while too. Like I create concerts and just projects around music, so many different things. So like when I get to meet people, it's always a bit awkward because like, what do you do? Then I spend 5 minutes trying to say everything I do.
Yeah.
Explain. So it was like, oh, how do I condense it? And if you want to know more, then you ask. And my wife, who is an author, said, you know what, actually, you're an architect. And because I take people's concepts and I turn them in, I make them reality. So I take them, design them, build it, and implement. That's literally what I do. Like that's the process all the way through. And she's like, that's the job of an architect. You design, and you even take it further, really, because you can build and implement it yourself. But anything around music, I am there, like conceptualizing it with the client, working out to build it if they need to, and making it a reality, really. So that, in a nutshell, that's what I do. So around songs, around albums, which we've just which we're finishing off right now, Sarah, around concerts and stuff like that, live recordings, all that stuff, that's, I'm all in that zone. So
that's really good to know for anyone listening and looking for somebody to work with. Paul?
Yeah, so I'm Paul. I make music under the name Wyld. I kind of produce with a lot of like collaborative sense as well. Collaborate with a lot of people that are not necessarily as big as what I am, but try and help bring them up to create more of a kingdom-focused music industry. And my superhero would probably be Iron Man because he's got cool stuff in it.
He has indeed. I think he's one of the most notorious ones, in my opinion. Always getting into trouble, as far as I know. That's how
which, as my wife would say, is very much like me.
Okay, that's very suited then. Well, that's really cool. And the interesting thing is your superhero characters are kind of a reflection of who you guys are in real life, which I find really interesting. I'm not really a superhero person myself, so I couldn't.
No, you must answer that question. You made all of us say.
I couldn't really choose, but if I could be a superhero, it would be Lego Movies Batman. That particular Batman I quite like. Yeah, so not all the other ones, but the Lego Movie Batman. Anyway, so let's get to the hot topic of today, the production process. Now, I have had so many of my mentees ask me different questions around the process, and I kind of asked Jude and Paul one of the questions before we came on live. But before we even go into the meat of the conversation, if somebody was, you know, looking to go into studio and produce a single or an album or an EP or a project in general, what is the fundamental thing that they need to have? So I woke up this morning, I wrote a song, I put it on paper, I put a voice note in my phone, and I'm thinking, let me go into studio. And I know you've seen everything from the most unprepared to the, you know, extremely well prepared. But in your opinion, I'll probably start with Paul. What do you reckon is the most fundamental thing an artist who said to themselves, now I want to go into studio, now I want to take the song, what should they really have in place in terms of the song or songs?
So I've never done a studio session with someone. My stuff is done over email, and I'm normally approaching them. So like recently I've had people just send me random stems from beats they've done, and we've like collaborated to do bits and pieces. But yeah, I've never done a studio session with someone. Like I've never sat down and done that with them. My stuff is always just done over email because I work with a lot of people in the US, and I've only worked with like 1 or 2 people in the UK. So a lot of the time I'm approaching them, or they're sending me demos, and we're kind of just doing it that way.
Okay. But even for a demo, so for example, an artist was looking to work with you on that kind of level, what kind of standard would you be looking for? Although I'm conscious you said you approach individuals. So for the ones that come to you, for example, what kind of standard would you be looking for in a demo?
Well, normally I would have heard their stuff before. So whenever I collaborate with someone, I'm a fan of them. I don't want to collaborate with someone for their clout or their numbers or their whatever it is. I want to collaborate with them for their talent rather than what they bring to me in numbers wise. So if I'm not a fan of their music, then I won't, like, it's just straight out the window. Right. So like recent example is like an artist called Shireen. She DM'd me once and was like, hey, I make music, I'd love to like work with you someday, and sent me a link, and started listening to her stuff. And over time I was like, okay, you're putting out quality stuff over and over again. You're doing something that is different to what is out there. You're kind of producing something that is definitely standing out within what the industry provides right now. So actually, yeah, this probably could work. And I'd only approach them as soon as I have something that I would feel comfortable them hearing. So I'm very much the opposite, because I'm an artist more than sitting in a studio with someone producing.
Yeah. And what are your thoughts on that question, Goziam? On that?
Yeah, for me, I don't need a demo really. I just need a voice note, because for me, I always like to hear the raw thing. I want to hear where it came from, how it was built. If there was anything I'll say come with, aside from a voice note, and that's even if we don't meet first, is to come with a vision of where you're trying to go, what you're trying to do, what you're trying to hit. You know, like it doesn't need to be like super like pinpointed and all packaged and everything. It's just an overall thing. This is what I'm seeing, this is what I'm hearing, because for me that helps me a lot in how I can then help get that concept and bring that concept into, or turn it into reality, because that's the key thing. I'm trying to turn concepts into reality. So I need to know, okay, and I have a strong idea of the concept, what your vision is, so then I can kind of enhance your vision as opposed to put myself into that. Yeah. So that's my personal approach, and you find that most of my projects, when you hear all the stuff I've done, maybe in my catalog, some you will not recognize a lot of them. You can't say this is a Goziam project. I don't think anyway, because I'm always trying to amplify the vision of the client or the artist, as opposed to put my stamp on it. And
I'm going to come back to you on the question of putting your stamp. I mean, in general, producers putting their stamps on songs, but I'm going to get Jude's response to this question, and we'll touch that in the course of the conversation as well.
Cool.
Yeah. So I think you need to be gifted. The there's a lot of people trying to make music who are not gifted, especially if we're trying to do the
Oh
gospel
boy, that's a
stuff.
low blow. That is harsh. I'm sorry. Speaking as an artist.
Because I mean, yeah, you have to. God has got. You need to have something, because it's difficult unless I'm just producing to make money, which happens a lot of times. But if it's somebody I want to invest in myself, work with, develop, or whatever, you need to be gifted. And then I also need to see you invest in yourself in the music, not like, oh, I'm bringing a single out this year and that's it. How many songs have you written? So you want to bring a single out, but you haven't written, let's say, 5 songs or so. But you believe that that one song is going to change, your life or the world or whatever. But you got to put in some work. So you got to be gifted. And of course, you need to invest. Then, just like my boss said, Gozi said, you got to have some sort of voice notes. It doesn't need to be complete. Just have a bit of a, even if it's a minute. I like choruses myself. I start producing from choruses. I'm not good with
Right.
verses, but if you give me a good hook, chorus, we can write together. We can make things happen. So, yeah, that's basically the process. Then we build on from there. Probably as I start to try get a tempo, then get a key to just work with and just program it to see before we go for live music or if anything like that. So that's my process.
And that's really interesting because somebody's asking from watching on YouTube, I believe, what is the yardstick to measure gifted? How do you determine? Because an artist could come in their own opinion with the perception that they are gifted, which is a genuine thing to perceive of yourself. And then you could come and be like, well, I don't think you're gifted. So how do you, I mean, it's quite relative, one could argue. So how do you determine somebody who's gifted enough to work with you as a producer?
Is that for me?
Yes, please, because you said you work with gifted people. Oh dear, only gifted people.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Unless he's trying to make money, I think he said, wasn't it?
Unless,
Unless it's a job, it's just a job, and it's like, look, yeah. But I think people will tell you, if you're from a church background, you're gonna hear it. People are gonna say, "Wow, wow," all the time, and in a way, God confirms it by just your lifestyle. You'd probably want to learn a guitar. You would want to sing for people's birthdays, whatever it is. There's always a natural thing that comes with being gifted, and when you're gifted. I'm sure everybody knows when they're gifted at something. It comes easier for you, and people just receive it a bit easier as well. When you're not gifted, okay, let's leave that. But you get my point.
yeah. No, that's absolutely fine. I mean, at the end of the day, it's really relative, in my opinion. It's like, how long is a piece of string? It's literally what's gifting, or what is a gifting to you, or a sign of somebody being gifted to you could be completely different to somebody else. So I guess it's relative. But anyway, moving on. So I'm an artist. I've just written my song on a tissue paper, put my voice note in the phone. I don't play any instruments, so I started on an A and I ended on an F. And I'm like, I want to produce this song, and then I bring it to you, and then you come back to me with something that sounds completely different from what I originally had in mind. Have you ever had such experiences with artists where what you produce sounds different from what they expected, and how have you both amicably handled the situation? And I'll probably go with Gozi on that, and then go around everyone.
Most of the time, I would say how the song comes is not how it leaves. Most of the time, but what I try to do is to carry the artist along in the process. So most of the times I try to get my artists to attend the sessions. I don't like this idea of closed sessions where, I just do all the work, then you come in and then say, hey, I want you to see how it's going down, because I feel like that educates the artist as well. Because they get
sorry to interrupt you there, but would you say that artists watching should actually expect that from producers, and if they're not getting that, they should request it? Would that be an ideal scenario? Because I think that makes sense to have them involved in the process.
Not man, because that's now speaking about different people's methodologies, and I can't really say that that's what the expectation should be. However, I think that should be a discussion that should be had before you go into the whatever agreement. That okay, how do you work? How are we going to work? How is this relationship going to work? I think that's the key thing to have because once it starts, if you start on an assumption, then literally it's going to be hard to move from that seat. I always say that whatever seat you start the journey on the, let's say you're on a train, for instance, more than likely is the same seat you're going to complete that journey on. It's going to be very rarely sometimes, and if we look at it just in normal train journeys, like if you've got a packed train, you can't get up and change your seat later on. And I think that works with processes as well, so I think that start off by asking the questions, and then that way you kind of have your outline for the process, and then whatever you guys agree is, I guess, what works for some people. Maybe some people are far away, I don't know, maybe they live quite a distance to the studio and it might be much more difficult for them to do, or maybe they work and it's hard to get time off, I don't know, but I think it's just a conversation that could help. I mean, I have a 3-step process, which is the pre-production, the actual production of the tracks, and the post-production. And I what I tend to do is on the pre-production, I keep it very light, but that's where we kind of get like an overall sense of like arrangement of the keys that we're going to work with, and of the sort of vibe, because like I said, I'm a musician first, so I can, paint this picture and create this vibe, and at that point we have this discussion with the artist. Say, hey, okay, cool. So this is what I'm thinking. This is the basis of it. This is the key. I've had them in the studio, even if it's for 2 or 3 hours, and we'll do that. At that point, they get to change or ask any questions that they need to do. And then once we get into the production process, that is the most costly part of the process. So, which is why we have the pre-production. So at that point, we say, okay, cool. Well, I'm now bringing musicians in, singers in to now expand on this pre-production thing that you have authorized and agreed to. And then we do that, but then you're there in the room, because I think it's important if the process allows for it.
Yeah.
Because you get to learn things. And what happens is your next project only gets better because you've now learned a lot.
Absolutely.
During the process of your current project, and then also if there's any niggly thing that you're like, oh man, I really need to change, you get to change it at that point. The most annoying thing for anybody, any producer, is you get towards the end and then you now want to change something that should have changed, maybe like in the production phase. So I think that is a whole nother benefit of being part of the process. So you're learning and you're able to influence the direction at the various points of the process, and the post-production, which is the mixing and mastering. Again, it's another opportunity to influence the final product. So I think that having it that way, even though yes, I was thinking of this actually, I don't know how many of my artists would agree, but to have like a session where I play the demo I got and the final product and just do an A and B just for fun.
Do you know that A and B, even though you say for fun, that could open up a whole can of worms, which we'll talk about later. We'll talk about that later because, I think I had a conversation with Jude a few days ago. That could open up a whole can of worms. And I do want to touch on that, actually. So we'll come to that. But I think in terms of the process, Jude, I'll probably ask you this next question, because particularly you deal with artists, you produce, artists from scratch through to the end. How have you found, sitting down with an artist and talking them through the process? Because me being a creative, I'm sometimes very enthusiastic. I just want to get in. And if I haven't got the experience of what it means to go into studio and produce a song from pre to post. I could just be like, yeah, let's do this. So how have you found like sitting an artist, a very excited and keen creative down and being like, here's the process? Or have you found it difficult to just talk people through what needs to happen step by step? Or do you find artists very keen on just going and just doing it?
I think if the artist trusts you, it's a bit easier to explain things, and then sometimes you don't even have to explain. You just move on. I find out that going a bit too deep into the production, some artists get a bit tired and bored. They start
All right.
falling asleep. I think I was explaining this to you the other day. A lady I was doing something for from Africa just said to me, Jude, it sounds great now. It's okay. We'll do this mastering thing. Is it needed? Let's just put it on Spotify.
Which is why
She
you have to
doesn't
have the
understand.
conversation beforehand, right? That it has to go
But
from
we
step
did.
A to B to C.
We actually did the budgeting and all that, and she saw that just roughly mixing was around 250 each, and she was thinking, hold on, this mixing is becoming more expensive than the production you did for me. So what's the point? But you try to explain it, and if for, let's say, artists in the UK, if they understand radio play and stuff like that, they just have to just go with the flow and understand the fact that you need to mix, you need to master, and then, like, for an example, years ago we would try play guitar with a keyboard. I mean, use a keyboard sound, right? But I don't do that anymore. I haven't done that for about 5 years because I
Thank
just
God.
dislike it,
Good on you.
right? I dislike it. So if I now have to call Ben Tricky and say, hey Ben, we need to do something, it adds to the cost of the production.
Yeah, you're right.
But it's something I would probably try and force a little bit. If you want that guitar sort of sound, I'm not going to play on the keyboard anymore. So it is spending time with them and also playing a lot of reference tracks. So you just play it to them like, look, this is going to cost like this. If you just want to go with a simple thing, this will cost a bit like this. But looking at how you sing and where the background you're coming from, this will work for you. So most of the time, their budgets will kind of determine which angle you go. But often most you come to an agreement. Sometimes you just end up doing it for them because you don't want to put your sort of your artistry on the line in that sense, because they'll say, yeah, take that guitar out. Do we need a bass? You can just play on the keyboard or whatever. It happens a lot to me. And you just think,
Right.
you know what, I'll play myself. I'll just get a good bassist from the church who understands the song to play. So you spend a lot of time with artists at the beginning. And that's why it's so important for me that we get the tempo right and the key right. And then after that, most of the time it's just me trying to manage things, because if they don't understand it, it's going to be very hard for them to get the process. But unless it's as an established artist, then it's a different ball game. They would even be forcing you to explain things to them, because an established artist understand the importance of the mixing stage. Just the mixing stage alone even. So they would spend on it, and they would move from engineers to engineers just to get that kind
It's
of
happened to me before.
thing. So I did
Yeah.
so I did Naje's EP, Naje Buzia, and I had to use a different engineer for it because I knew the previous engineer I used, that sound wouldn't work. So I had to explain how much that is going to cost or how long it's going to take for us to use a certain engineer. So these are things that come with it. So that's a bit of the process. It's not straightforward. It's very different for every artist, whether they're experienced or not.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, you all have your different niches in how you produce. Obviously, Paul, you do a slightly different style of production than Gozi and Jude, but I suspect you all have similar experiences with the different people that you work with in terms of collaborations, because as a producer, you're taking something from, as Gozi said, from point A to point B. And this is a question I received on Instagram, which I want to ask you guys. When we talked about, when I put the post up that we're going to be talking about the production process, and I'm going to ask all of you to comment on this because I think it's a very hot topic. And I'm not sure if he's watching. I did say to the individual to join us. So this question is for all three of you. what are your thoughts on the entitlement of a producer who has been duly paid for the production to share at all in the proceeds of the produced track? I'm presuming that this individual's producer, after being paid, may have asked to get a share of the royalties or a share of the sales. So, and I know these conversations tend to happen sometimes depending on, as I said, how the song transformed from point A to point B. So I'm going to start with Paul, because I know that your style is slightly different. I'll be quite interested to see what your position is on that, and then we'll go round up to Jude.
So I just do 50-50 with all my artists.
That's good. Keep it simple.
No one seems to complain.
So do they actually pay you a fee and also you get 50% of the royalties, or you don't take a fee at all and you just take the royalties?
No, because I'm releasing it. So I just do 50-50. Normally we're collaborating on something, so we just do 50-50 of the track share, because I'm normally making like the instrumental side and they're normally doing the lyric side. So 50-50, stick them together, kind of get 100. So yeah. It just keeps it simple, rather it's normally the conversations happen beforehand, so you know where each other are. So like, there's some points where I think I've produced one other track for someone else, and they paid me and gave me a share, but that was agreed beforehand. So like, I always go in to agree beforehand what happens, and then that normally follows through. But I mean, you're normally entitled to like some rights anyway, like PPL and all these other bits and pieces. So as producers, you do have certain credits you can get in some other ways, rather than just straight up just streaming royalties.
Absolutely. And equally, if you contribute to the songwriting, because you've already said the reason you're saying 50-50, which some people who are watching may not really grasp, is because you have done the songwriting on the music side and the other individual has done the songwriting on the lyric side, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so there's like composition of music and lyrics, that sort of thing. So
correct.
Because I'm approaching someone else, like I'm the person releasing it, I'm not being paid to release someone else's song. Like it's me. So you're working on my thing. So I do 50-50 with people. Yeah,
that makes sense. And as I said, it's great that it's communicated from the start. So to Gozi, on the topic, what is your viewpoint?
So there are two. Okay, cool. Do we go? How deep do you want to go on this?
I knew this was going to be a hot potato, but yeah.
So because there are two types of royalties that you can collect. There's the mechanical royalties, and then there is the performance royalties, which we tend to generally call publishing, right? Now, as a producer, on the mechanicals, which is the royalty that comes from the sale or now the stream, mostly of the record, you're normally you will get anywhere between 1 to 5%, whether you're paid or not. That is just part of the makeup, and that's the mechanicals. Now, in the gospel industry, we rarely take that, because to take that, to do that, that means the artist has to pay the MCPS. So for every copy printed and stuff, they have to pay a fee, which is the only way you can get that. And the administration is crazy. There is also a lot. There's just so much, and it's just like, so people just tend to leave that alone. Now, then there is the publishing side, or I say publishing, but the performance rights, which is on the songwriting. Now, it's quite dicey, because what should happen is, if someone comes with lyrics and a melody and you do the music, as Paul said, it should be straightforward, 50-50, because you've done the composition of music and you've done the lyrics writing kind of thing. Now, if someone comes in and they bring in all their demos, and it's like, okay, we just need you to expand on this a little bit, there will still be some writing, because you're not just arranging at that point. You're still looking to change stuff or whatever, but it's now becomes a discussion point, as opposed to, this is my due. So you say, okay, cool, well, I'm doing this, and this is what I feel like I deserve for this. How do you feel about this? And blah, blah, blah. You talk about that before you go in, after you.
Can you say that again, please? That word before. Honestly, I think it is something we need to
you have to talk about it
hammer
before.
on. Yeah.
Before, if I was writing, might be in capital letters, in red and bold and everything.
Yes.
Why? Because once it's been done, it's a harder conversation.
Yeah.
Because you've already put your blood, sweat, and tears into it. And you know, the artist has their own ideas, you have your own ideas, and then it becomes a cause for contention or potential contention if you don't see eye to eye or you don't agree on your expectations. So it's expectation management, which is why you need to do it before, because if you're not going to agree on it, then don't do it. Don't even go into it. I find out that a lot of us, both producers and artists, have to be educated on this, because a lot of people think they know, but actually the honest truth is they don't know.
Right.
Even so-called established people, because which is a whole different conversation, maybe not for here, but publishing is probably one of the most confusing aspects of music and even literature, actually. Is publishing is just so confusing, and there are rules around it, but it's really a conversation in negotiation. So which is why before is crucial. You negotiate before you go into any situation, and everyone is clear and you do it. But what should happen is, if you're creating the music, you have composition rights. If you're writing lyrics, you have lyrics rights, and then you have the discussion. Some of the things I discuss with my artists is, say, look, I'm doing composition, you're doing lyrics, that's fine. We might do 50-50 or whatever percentage we agree on. But rather than saying I'm just doing composition, you're doing lyrics, we mix it up, and that's just our process. So because on PRS you can say composition and lyrics, or you can just lyrics or just composition. We mix it up. Why do we mix it up? Because it's just a way we all can earn. Why? Because if the soundtrack, for instance, gets picked up for a movie and they decide not to use the lyrics, then what happens is the lyricist earns nothing. And vice versa, like, you know, Paul is doing a remix, so he comes and says, okay, I'm going to do a remix for this song, so I just want the vocal stem. That vocal stem, he puts a whole new music on it. That becomes a whole new body of work. So then it's like, well, yeah. So if you have 100 remixes and stuff like that, but then you find out that actually a lot of remixes, I'll be very careful in my saying, but a lot of remixes take a lot of their inspiration from the original track sometimes.
Interesting.
So, you know, you're listening to it and, you know, you might not take everything, but you might take 20%, 30%, or 50% even. Sometimes I found that some remixes would use the keyboard stem and then just build the beat around it. So how then do you, like, so at that point it gets confusing. I said, look, let's mix it all together, lyrics and composition, and we agree on the percentage, and we're good, you know. And in that way, everybody can keep earning. But one of the biggest misconceptions from artists is that because I brought the song to you and I paid you, means that you don't have a right to royalties. That is a lie.
And I think something to add, and I'm going to come to you, Jude, to get your response on that as well, to at least weigh into that question. I think something to probably make artists aware of is that there are two different kinds of copyrights. There's the copyrights in terms of owning the masters, which you, as the person who was paid to create the master, you own anyway. So if you're a record label, you would own the masters.
Mechanicals.
And then there's exactly. And there's the copyright for the songwriting. So what you as an artist need to have a bit of, you know, reassurance in is knowing that unless you and the producer put money together to create the song, if it was your capital that created the song, then at least you own that 100%. And then if you have to pay whoever, you do that. But for the songwriting, ideally, the song that the producer has created part of the music. And I always say to my mentees, if you think about any song that you like, you can always remember some bass hook or some piano, riff or something aside from the lyric that when you hear it, it's the song. And so who wrote that? Whether it was a musician in the band or the producer who suggested that that be written, if you weren't the person who wrote that hook or that bass line, then that individual deserves credit for writing that. And that's kind of how I try to explain this kind of phenomenon. You're kind of creating different aspects of the DNA of the song. So if you're contributing to the DNA, the identity of the song, then you deserve credit. I'm answering the question for Jude already. So Jude, let me get your input on that. And don't tell me you have nothing to add.
I think Goziam and yourself, you've answered it all, really. So it's a difficult one, like Gozi said, because some artists come to the studio or want to start a project as producers themselves because they have an idea or they can play the keyboard or whatever. A musician from the church helped them put something together, and they just need professional equipment to record the stuff. Someone to guide them through the process.
Which makes sense.
How you're going to deal with it is very different from an artist that has come to you to say, okay, I want to write songs with you, or I've got ideas, let's build together. Now, building together like that, they need to understand, like what Gozi said, you need to understand that, of course, you're not just paying for my time, but it's for creativity. You're not just paying for the studio and equipment, but my years of experience and also the gifts that God has given me. So you need to have a conversation, but that conversation can most sometimes make the project or not make the project, in my experience. There's so many times we've had that conversation and it didn't happen. Most of the time.
Right.
But it actually happens a lot because people are scared of contracts and all that. But sometimes I'm thinking, why are we worried about, who would take what when the song hasn't even made it yet, or the song would probably just be played in a church and not get the royalties that it sort of deserves because the artists haven't registered things properly and everything, like Gozi was saying. So it is important. Like an example, there was a track I was working on recently, and the sound engineer wanted points, and that's what's happening now as well, because the artist couldn't afford the not like that couldn't afford, but was finding it hard to pay for the mixing and that. The engineer was trying to get points in there, which I said to the artist, look, if we don't have the money, I'm not going to pay for it. Let's look into it in that sense. So I think definitely you need to have a conversation to see and maybe be fair. But what happens most of the time, like Gozi was saying, the A to B, artists know themselves that let's put it this way, 60% the producers that kind of qualify the music. And I hope I don't get in trouble for this. But they come with ideas and producers need put it together because you're
But the
telling the
artists could
guitarist do this
argue,
way.
and I'm going to be devil's advocate here, but the artists could argue that that's what they're paying you for. They're paying you to do that job of produce the song. That could be an argument, So how do you respond to that? Because I've had people say to me, well, I'm paying him X to produce the song, so why should I give him any more than that, That's been an argument I've heard many times. So how do you respond to that?
Okay, so I guess when you put it that way, producing involves arranging, writing, and everything. But like we said, you gotta have a conversation because as an artist, you gotta be fair. You're not going anywhere if you don't have the right producer to help you and assist your music in that sense. Or you can just record at home or whatever and put it out, which happens these days. People do it and they're able to do something. But if you want to do it what we call properly, you and like I'm gonna make a statement. If you're an artist and you jump producers too many times as well, that's an example of someone I feel that might not be stable. You need to take time to work with an artist over years. Look at the secular music, Michael Jackson and some of these people. Make time, find someone, connect with mentally and with your build together. When you have that kind of relationship, these things about points and royalties and that is a bit easier because
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know that, okay, for now, this music, we're not making nothing of it. But hey, Jude, when things take off, let's do 30%. Is that okay? And then you can just agree. But if there's no relationship or continuity, you know that this is just a project. It's just something you're just doing to make money because you make 24 tracks a year. Then it's a different conversation. I'm not sure if I've answered your question in that sense.
I'm hoping. I'm hoping those who have those kind of concerns are able to take the answer away. Because when I started out, I remember somebody said to me that if you're paying a producer, then ideally they shouldn't be, unless obviously they're co-writing with you or adding anything to the song. And this was more so they were talking from the perspective of, if I'd done a demo, I'd written what the piano should sound like, I'd written, because some people actually write the whole thing, right? And they come in, as you said, to use your equipment to record. So, and I'm talking from that perspective, that if you're coming in with pretty much everything all laid out, and then you're just going, I need an engineer or somebody to record, mix and master, could there be an argument for just paying a fee and not wanting to do anything more? Because I've heard that argument made.
You know, one thing for me is, I think it's maybe redefining the roles. And because what a producer is, or who a producer is now, has changed over time.
Okay.
A producer is somebody who comes in and has the vision for the music and is able to write the music, and it doesn't actually have to play, or she doesn't have to play, and be able to write this music and explain it to the musicians, almost like the in between the artists and the musicians, and get it to sound a certain way, right? That is actually the job of a producer. The whole idea right now, which has been taken totally out of context, where a producer is the person who is the engineer, and the producer is the person who mixes and masters, who record. No, that is not the job of a producer.
Okay, interesting.
Let's just redefine that, because what has happened is technology has helped us, but also taking loads of things out of context. So when a producer is able to do those things, that's amazing, because it means that, yes, you know, everybody's having to multitask these days to stay in business. But a producer that mixes and masters and does everything is doing 2 different jobs, or 3 different jobs, or even 4 at times, because they play all the different instruments. Then they have the vision for the music. They engineer the stuff. They mix. They master. Sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing, because it's the same ears all the way through.
Yeah.
But ultimately, if you look at it as the producer is doing this, then you start to understand why there is a battle, or not battle, but more like a reason, or a reason why they need to get intellectual property of the track, because that's really what it is. It's an IP. You know, so when someone says, oh, I paid a producer to do that, well, if you were going to produce the track, then you come in, you go hire a studio, hire the musicians, and you tell them what to do. Then you're producing the track as this, and you've just hired hands, and in contract terms, they call it work for hire agreement. So
which is what, it used to be, wasn't it?
Yeah. So literally, you hire them and say, okay, cool. I'm going to pay you to execute what's in my mind. And then you can have all the rights to the mechanicals and all the rights to the performing rights and everything. And then the musicians get paid, and at most they get the PPL. At least in the UK anyway. That's simple, straightforward, whatever. The minute you involve somebody else who has to take the time and bring in their expertise and their writing and all of that experience to help expand what you're doing, it's changed. You've changed the narrative. It's not just a work for hire agreement, unless you decide to do something called a buyout agreement, where you say to them, okay, I know that this is your intellectual property and everything, but I'm going to pay you X amount extra on top of your normal fee for arranging and musicians and all of that, so that you don't have any of the rights, and I retain my 100%. But then that now becomes an agreement between the artist or record company and the producer as to what that fee would be. because then that fee could be anything from £1,000, £500 to 100,000, depends on what they see. It's like buying a business.
Song, the potential of the song,
Yeah. What's the business worth, and then you sell it at that point, and then that's that. But I think it's a very, very big misconception. I don't know where it comes from and how we got here, but it's here nonetheless. And I think it's just miseducation. So if you want to do it that way, then go get your musicians and produce it yourself. And then in that scenario that you described, Sarah, where you say, "Oh, I'm paying you," and then that way I should have everything. Then yes, that works. But once you go into this other bit that I described, that's intellectual property is mixing at that point. And at that point, you have to, again, it has to be discussed before, because maybe the artist thought, you know what, I was planning to produce it myself. And they didn't realize that's what they were doing, because sometimes terminology mix-ups. They're like saying, "Oh yeah, I just really wanted you to kind of just, play the keys," and because it's also how you see it, because you see the producer as the guy on the keyboard, and you call them a producer, then it's a terminology mix-up. They're just a musician at that point. So I think it's just terminologies and a real understanding of what happens when a track is created, because there is the normal work for hire in getting stuff down, and there's the intellectual property that is also happening underneath all of that.
Yeah, which is where PRS comes in. And actually, to kind of segue from that, Paul, you kind of hinted around still being able to get the splits for the mechanicals, because it's possible to set that up with a distributor. Do you want to shed a bit more light on that? Because I think that's something we can all benefit from understanding a bit more.
Yeah, so you mentioned that there's no point getting 5% off someone. So I've literally just done some maths just based off my own stats. So if you took 5% off me for my lifetime, so if you produced every one of my songs, you would have made about £2,000 from my streaming numbers, and you would have made £85 off my purchases.
Now that is not money you want to throw away. So pray tell, how can this be redressed? Because the understanding from what I've heard just now is that there isn't necessarily a mechanism for splitting, but you've mentioned, or you've kind of indicated, that there is a mechanism for splitting. So is that money being thrown away then?
So if you distribute through Spotify and iTunes and all these other stuff, through DistroKid or through a load of other places, you can add splits, which will automatically split and distribute money out. I mean, like I said, I understand on the CDs, like you'd get $85. Whereas if you're saying that you're not going to do it on the streaming side of it, that's based off like a lifetime over 5 years, but you're missing out on, like in the past month, on, I don't know what, doing some very quick maths, on the past month alone, like your 5% does add up. Because it's monthly income that you're technically missing out on. Whereas with CD sales, it's obviously all over the place.
There's no CDs really. I think the big question, whilst you're doing the math, Paul, I think the big question is, we already have complicated topics on the table with what we just talked about in terms of the fee and the splits on the songwriting. I don't know what you guys think about how this could muddy the waters even more if we then came and said, and to be fair, it is standard, it is business, it should be the norm. But what do you reckon? How complicated do you reckon the conversation could become if we're talking about a fee, we're talking about the PRS split, and then we talk about the MCPS, which a lot of people, as you said, Goziam, don't even really know what it means. But as Paul has rightly pointed out, that's money being thrown away as well. Not for me, obviously, for you guys, because I'm the artist. So
I mean, that's just saying that like 5% as well. That's not saying like if you're doing any more on other people's stuff, but like say this month you would have earned 50 quid.
But then the argument, because if this becomes a thing that becomes a norm, the argument from artists could be, well, if you're getting that percentage on the MCPS, you're getting a percentage on the PRS, then we can renegotiate your fee. If I were going to speak from an artist perspective, that would be my stance. That's
fine. It's just a lot of this boils down to your agreement before you start working to.
Yeah.
So like if you don't agree it before you do it and the contracts and stuff don't state it, then you're not entitled to it because you've agreed that you're not entitled to it. But whereas if you say beforehand, I feel like I'm entitled to do whatever. Maybe you're paying me a lower fee than I'd already accept, so I'd take a higher percentage, then fine. But sometimes if you're saying that normally you would take between 1% and 5% of the mechanicals, but we're throwing it away because CDs, it's so hard to do it on CDs, yet we're in a streaming age where you could potentially be earning 50 quid extra a month off one artist. And then if you're producing for multiple people, add that up to however much. We're potentially throwing away money that could be in our benefit for 5% or something.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely a very, very, very valid point. In this industry right now, I think.
Which one? The gospel industry or the music industry? Okay.
No, the gospel industry, because anytime I've done anything outside of gospel music, it's not even a conversation. And or I do something with a record company, it's not a conversation. It's just what it is. It's like, did you write on it? Yeah, great, cool, great. You do whatever. Did you produce it? Yeah, this is great. I mean, it's even so deep that when I work with record companies, until they pay me my full balance, I own the record.
Wow, are you kidding?
Yeah.
No way.
That's how it works, actually.
Do you know if it's crazy?
Hey, yeah.
I'm just thinking about how many, and I know I can only speak for myself because I know I don't ever owe anyone, but I can imagine people have told me, I mean, producers have told me stories of people who never pay or just walk away from a product. So I can imagine how much content you could actually own from the failed, the bad debt and things.
But,
wow.
But I think that comes, if we take it a bit biblical, that the point where we say, you're going into something, you must count the costs.
Absolutely, before you even step out.
Yeah, counting the cost is not just how much am I going to spend, but is having a good understanding of what it's really going to cost, both in your time, in your research, and in the money you expend, and the money you're going to earn later on. It's a lot. It's a massive industry. I think it's the accessibility, the easy access has made a lot of people lazy.
Yeah,
and
this
that's
is it.
Both producers, musicians, artists. Because it's like, I'm just doing it. I just really, really need to make money from this, and I'm gonna do it real quick and get out and get the money and run. And we lose out on a lot of money. You're right. We lose out on a lot of money, and it's taking education. And the thing is, the education is so convoluted. But you just have to persevere and look for it. Look for the information. Ask whoever you need to ask, and have these conversations continually. But if you're doing this full time, and this is for producers, it is not very easy to just say that, because you might lose a lot of clients initially.
That's the thing, isn't it?
You're fighting this battle, and that is just the reality. So you just have to decide, how you want to fight it, because you can be very dogmatic and be like, no, I'm not going to do this. But then you have to decide, okay, well, is this a long-term battle I'm willing to fight? And yes, I need this money to live right now, so I will do this, and I'll keep fighting this, and I'll keep educating myself on this. And obviously, the more value you have as a person or as a producer, the easier it is to have these discussions. Because even the percentages on the mechanicals, it's stated like just in loads of publishing journals that it's between 1% to 5%. And the disparity there is just dependent on the value of the producer. So if you're a big boy producer, you're going to be getting the 5%. If you're starting out and whatever, you're in the 1% to 2% bracket. So again, it's what you negotiate. You get what you negotiate. But again, it's the artist has to understand. And the difficulty is that loads of artists are record companies now.
Pretty much. But then we're record companies without knowing what a record company is supposed to know.
Exactly.
So it's just like this huge knowledge gap, which is one of the reasons why I'm doing these things, is to help us really understand the process and literally the legalistic aspects as well, like the contracts and the conversations you need to have prior to even starting, the journey of going into production. But just one question I was going to ask on the contract side of things, the legal conversations. You mentioned, Gozi, that you find it easier when you're talking to labels or outside of the gospel space. Is that the norm? Because I've heard people say things like that, that when it comes to business or contracts, it's more awkward when you're dealing with people within our space, which I find really a bit unsettling. Is that what you experience as well, given that you've done both sides of the fence, if that makes sense?
Yeah, for sure, because I think that contracts just generally make people nervous. And once you see like a few pages, you're like, oh my gosh, I need a lawyer, and and lawyers are not cheap. Like, if you're going to do it the right way. So I find that people shy away from it sometimes. And so then everything else is quite verbal. And when it's a verbal contract, anything can change because I said, you said kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I say that what I found easy as well is that in this new age of technology, like courts will accept email.
I was just going to say emails are a good middle ground.
And even text messages now where you can see a trail of a conversation. So you ask a question, hey, blah, 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 how much do you charge? I charge £500. If you agree to do it, you say, yes, that is a contract. Literally, that's because I had my sister-in-law is a lawyer and just asked questions. So it's like, okay, what is a contract? What constitutes a contract? It's like
the legally binding.
So it's like, okay, what's they ask? They ask the response and the agreement or whatever. And most of the times you now have the they have a name for it where you says what laws, what country the laws what am I trying to say? Yeah, it applies to. So are you doing it UK law, US law, Canadian law, Nigerian law, whatever? You have to know exactly because they differ. So that would be the only other thing at the end of the contract that kind of helps it along. So you can do things that way. But that's a tedious process. We said it just now in like 2-3 minutes, but to have the paperwork, do that, cross your T's, dot your I's, make sure it's dated, it's signed. And then actually there's some contracts that if you sign just by yourself without a witness, it's null and void, and it's just I
think yeah, because I mean, looking at it from my perspective as an artist, when you go to a producer, you're not looking at, ideally you're not looking at contracts and legal conversations and lawyers. You're like, oh, this is my brother in church, or this is this guy who's an MD in my sister's church or whatever, or oh, I met him at an event and I know he produces X, Y, and Z. So they're kind of looking at it more as a less formal conversation. However, there is the importance of formalizing the conversations, talking about the fees, talking about the payment terms, talking about the scope of work that's being covered, whether you're going to mix as part of the production and they need to master with somebody else, or you're going to do the entire thing from top to bottom. I know it's a bit tedious when we talk about contracts, but I'd like to suggest maybe that at least emails, between both parties, and you just kind of save them somewhere. I literally have a folder where I save important email conversations I have, so I literally know this is what was said, or I flag the emails even with a color in my email folder, so I know this is what was said and this is what was agreed, and then there can be no disputes. And it's very important, I say to people, don't burn your bridges. Even if you think, oh, I'm just going to work with this individual once and then I move on, don't burn your bridges. Relationships are very important, and it's very critical as Christians that we always leave a good impression with whoever we work with. And I'm speaking more to artists now, because I've heard so many things producers say to me about artists, and I feel bad as an artist. I'm like, can we not do these things? Can we pay, whoever we've agreed to pay on time? And if we're struggling, can we let them know, just give notice if we need to, but we need to be responsible because we're ministers, we're on stage, we're proclaiming God's word, we're preaching the gospel in music. We have to be people of integrity. I don't know where that came from. It's a bit of a segue, but anyway, I thought I'd just throw that in there, and I'm sure you guys are very happy. You're beaming inside. You're like, tell them. See, Jude is literally confirming what I just said. But no, so there's this other topic that I get asked quite a lot, and I'm sure you get asked the question all the time. It is, how much should I budget to produce my song? I get asked that question a lot, and my response is usually depending on genre and a few other things. But I'm going to take you guys, starting from Jude. I know it's like how long is a piece of string, but I want the people who are watching to be able to take something away to say, okay, if I don't have X amount, then I shouldn't even bother. I need to save, because at the end of the day, you don't want, see, somebody's already attested to that. You said, good question. You don't want to start, building a house without knowing the cost. And there are different kinds of houses, but at least you want to know how much it costs to build a hut or a mansion, and then you can fit yourself somewhere in between. So I'll start with Jude. How much should I budget to produce a song? Help!
A song. It's very difficult because it's cheaper when it's an album or an EP, but a song, is that including mixing and mastering? Or
yeah, literally, if I wanted to, and as you said, it's cheaper if you do a bulk project. But let's say I was that person who just wanted to do a song and I wanted to do the whole thing to mastering, whether with you or with the producer or with somebody else, but because it's a finished product, so it has to include the cost of mastering as well.
Wow. I can't be responsible for this. Okay, I would say, wow.
Again, as I said, you can budget for a hut, you can budget for a mansion. So you literally need to give us some kind of range, and the people can fit themselves wherever.
I would say about £1,000 to 1,500. If you're involving musicians, and mixing and mastering alone can take £500 away. And then that's if you're spending just a day on the production or a day or two. But it can be anything bigger than that. Really. It can just keep going. But let's say for an artist who is just, I just don't want to say an artist, just an artist, but if they're in the charts or they're doing music like that, out there touring, prices is always going to be different because you need to spend a bit more time to produce a much more sort of refined music. But if it's just an artist who's starting out that you're working with or whatever, yeah, I'm sure £1,000, 1,500 can do. I guess the lowest you could go is maybe 750 for a song if you want to be nice about it. Yeah.
And what do you guys think, Goziam and Paul?
I'll let Paul go.
I've never been paid to make a song for someone else, so I've got no clue.
Oh yeah, because he does 50-50. So
right. No, but I don't produce for other people, so I don't know.
I see.
Oh yeah, you produce for yourself. That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Like you said, are you building a hut or are you building a mansion? And I think that if you're going with in the box production, then yes, you're on that around the £1,000 mark, maybe.
What is in the box for those who don't know?
In the box is just everything is in a computer. What most people see, so one person sits in front of his keyboard and does everything on that keyboard, and there's a mic at the back of the room, and you as the artist come and play your lead vocal, and it's done. That is in the box. So in the box, normally the computer is like a box. That's what we'll call it. Yeah, so you could do that, and again, it's a very difficult question you're asking, Sarah, because there's so many variables. Why I say there are many variables? There's the variable of what it's going to take to make that track, and then there's the variable of the personnel that you're bringing on to make the track. Because if you're bringing on, someone who is coming with decades of experience, they will charge a lot more for the same session, exact same session. Because when you're hiring a space, most of the time the space is fixed. This is the space. If it goes and it has this amount of equipment, and this is the size of the space, you buy that, and and if there's a inflation, you do that. When it comes to people, man, why I'm not going to answer that question with a figure. Is because when you apply for let's say you go for an interview for a job, the easiest way is when the company tells you what their budget is. And the budget that the company gives attracts a certain type of personnel for that interview. So if you come in 20 years of experience, you might not go for a job that's paying you 30 grand a year. You might be going for 6 figures. So that's a massive variable, and that would change from person. So like, I guess, know who you're approaching, understand the value that they have. I know like a few friends of mine, and this is more in the secular world, said like, some producers charge up to about $500,000.
Oh,
yeah. And that is based on the fact that $500,000, when you go to them, you're almost guaranteed the number one, because their name.
That's the Beyonce kind of producer.
Like, you're like saying, hey, I got X and X to produce my track. So
yeah. You're getting the clout as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. You're right.
So it's such a hard one to say, because anything we say now, some people will take that as gospel and lock it and said, well, I was on Sarah's live the other day and they told me that it was not more than
yeah, I know. But I think the caveat here, as I said earlier, is what are you building? Are you building a hut or a mansion? What are you producing? And I think Jude has also mentioned the element of whether you're going to get BVs, band, and obviously Goziam has also talked about whether it's just in the box. So if you're producing something and there's not going to be musicians, because I remember when I did my first album, the cost kept, ramping up, because we had the basic cost of production, which we kind of agreed. So this is what the basic cost is. And if I had any song where we felt, oh, we need to have acoustic in this one, or, oh, we need to have a Hammond sound in this one, or we need to have this, we have the mutual understanding that anything over and above that foundational cost would be an additional cost. I wouldn't expect my producer to go and bring a BV and pay it out of his own pocket. So I know that if we hear a certain sound or a certain element and we need to get somebody in to add that element, that's an additional cost. So it does ramp up as well. So even if you're going by that ballpark number of 1,005, that could easily ramp up if for different songs you have different needs and you're hearing different things, But again, it could even be $500,000 depending on who you're going to ask to produce. So are you building a house, or are you building a hut or a mansion? But actually, there was a question that came up. I left it on the screen, and that question was, I think, from Matt Kane Music. Should I budget for a full album or for just song by song? I have an answer, but I want to hear what you guys have to say.
Personally, I always advise for album if you can. Why? Because I think that you can benefit from economies of scale. In that way, so it, however little you can save some money, by just doing it in bulk. So that's the only reason I would say budget for an album, but you can release in as singles.
Yeah, I highly recommend that as well, because that way you can produce them in bulk and then just put them out as and when you need them to be put out. Okay, so we're going to be wrapping up. There's one final question I'm going to ask each one of you, and that would be a big do and a big don't for artists around the production process. And I was going to ask about the mixing and mastering, only because some artists sometimes don't understand the importance of mixing and mastering. However, I know, Jude, you've kind of alluded to that when you mentioned somebody who didn't really see the value. But I'm wondering if I should actually touch on that very quickly to help artists understand the importance of mixing and mastering. Because as you said, Jude, you had this client who thought it sounded okay and was happy to go with the song. And in all honesty, some people can't tell the difference between a pre-master and a mastered track. And so maybe a bit of education here, probably with you, Jude, given that you recently had that conversation, a bit of education on that would help anyone watching who might not be really clear on the value of mixing and then mastering before putting out a song.
Yeah, so you can produce a track, and so this happens a lot these days now. Whilst you're producing, you're almost mixing, so you're creating the space, because that's what mixing really is. You're making it sound. It kind of makes the genre, where that's what mixing really kind of becomes, the space, whether you want a larger space or a smaller space, or you want the bass to be right in front or behind, or BVs, however you want it to be. But is very different from just producing a track, because some people can just produce a track for you, give you the stems to go mix. So you can give two engineers a song to mix, and the song would sound totally different. Totally like 100% different. And that's why I think that process is so important. But I don't think most artists understand that yet. And most of the time, what you get is producers then liaising with the mixing engineer as to how they want the songs to sound, not necessarily the artist. So I get that a lot, where the artist is like, yeah, Jude, what do you think? What do you think? Because they don't know what technically would sound good in terms of mixing until really it's out there. We just accept it, because some songs will sound good in arena and some songs will sound good in just a little stereo, depending on how well it's mixed. And I guess mastering, especially where it's more evident, is where they say you make an album or whatever, the consistency, the level of the music, how balanced bass or treble or the frequencies are, and how level the music is. You don't want to be going through an album and then track one is up there in volume and track two is all the way down there. So mastering kind of sees to all that audio, the whole track 8 or 12 or whatever sounds almost like it's from the same artist or within the same sort of space. So I think, aside from producing the track or whatever, it's very important for artists to wait and make sure their mixing is done very well, and that can take days, months. Some people, especially in the secular world, it can take a year. The whole mixing. You get someone like Kanye West will mix a track. Yeah, someone like Kanye West will mix a track on 5 different mixing consoles just to get a particular sound.
Although I think Kanye is extra, though, I have to say. So I don't know if that's a normal practice. Otherwise, you're not going to get your album out for decades if you're having to.
But does he get a song? So like Goziam was saying, some people would mix in the box on a computer and everything, and will still take it to a studio to put it through an SSL analog. Do you know what I mean? Just to get a particular sound.
Yeah,
so that's how important that whole bit is. Not sure if I've answered your question.
No, definitely. I think it's really helpful, because sometimes we want to skip that step once we've heard the mixed version and we're like, oh, this sounds good. But even for a single, you would still recommend mastering, because it kind of polishes the finished product, doesn't it?
Yeah, you have to. For radio and other things, you have to. And like we're saying, where are you trying to take the music? Because if you don't do it properly, this is why we have songs from 60 years back still sounding good in our stereos and stuff.
Yeah.
And if you don't do it properly now, what's going to happen is in the next 3 years, things are going to change. So like an example, what's happening on YouTube now is a song that you can listen to, or a music video you can listen to at 720p or 1080 sounds different from a 4K video, if you get what I mean. Because of the bit rates and how the music is coming out. So you go kind of future-proof your music, and definitely good mastering kind of helps with that. You can still listen to a Michael Jackson song right now. You can listen to a Michael Jackson song right now in your car and still bump your head and hear everything clearly. But you can't say the same for some gospel music in the past, because it wasn't somewhere not done a certain way.
Yeah, I guess the first excuse I'd say to that would probably be budget constraints, but I'll be a bit of a devil's advocate on that one. Okay, so we've kind of touched on, I think that's pretty much the end of the process, because once the song is mastered, it's by producer. I expect that that's typically how your experiences have been with, obviously they come back for other songs, but in general, as far as that project is concerned, once it's mastered, that is the end of the process. Unless you feel like there's anything else that happens after that.
I think so. I think so, but you know, like how it is these days, like we've been talking about, you could really, as a producer, walk away after you finish producing it, in that sense, as in the recording process and that, and let the artist deal with the mixing and mastering. So they might have somebody else they feel can do it.
Yeah, I mean, after the mastering, so after the mastering is finished, that is the final step that artists need to know. Once that's done, the song is finished. and then they can just put it
Oh,
out.
yeah.
So one thing that we didn't touch on, which I tend to do with my music, and I think it's worth highlighting because I don't know how many artists know this, and I wanted to make sure that we mentioned this on today's session, is the importance of metadata in the mastering process. In terms of putting the ISRC code in the songs, how important do you reckon that is? Because I genuinely feel that's really important, having the metadata, particularly if your music's played on radio.
Yeah, I mean, definitely having it on there for radio is great. Especially radio stations that have the facility to read the metadata.
Yeah.
Otherwise, generally, like, you can also, as part of your press pack nowadays, also send obviously your name and the ISRC code with it, and they can with technology it's much easier to track nowadays. But it's like, if you can afford to do it, not that it costs anything, but you just, with planning, do it in the mastering process is just easier, because for those radio stations that can do it, if your song does get there, it's then easier and it's less hassle for the radio station.
Yeah, because the metadata is already in there. Yeah, exactly.
But I would say that even with metadata, still back it up by sending it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Part of your press pack.
Absolutely. Okay, so that was the final question I had in terms of just the process from top to bottom and start to finish. But what I wanted to go around the houses and ask very quickly before we finish today was, if you had one tip in terms of do's and don'ts for artists, whether it's from the start of the process, during the process, before we begin, or after, what would that be? I know, Paul, you say you don't produce for others, but just in general, from your experience as an artist, or maybe even the collaborations that you've done, it'd be interesting to see what your thoughts are in terms of just one do and one don't that people can probably learn from and take away from today's session.
Yeah, I'll quickly, just before that, I'll go back to the money side of things. I've just spoken to 3 artists who don't pay more than £500, and they are all on 20 to 100,000 monthly listeners.
So they don't pay more than what? Sorry, what's that?
£500 for production, and they're on more than like 20 to 100,000 monthly listeners. So like, you don't need to pay $1.5 to get a good song. Like, as long as your songwriting is solid, as long as the production sounds good, as long as you're regularly releasing onto Spotify and all these other places, then stuff will start happening. You don't need to be paying thousands of pounds to make it big. Like Amen Worldwide saying, is like, we can't say that the production was the solid reason why Michael Jackson is still big today, or why all the other people are. It's just like, culturally they still exist because they're like cult hits now. Like, can we say that Drake will still be around in 20 years? Can we say that Justin Bieber will still be around in 20 years? Like, just because of production, or was it like a time in history that wants to be remembered? So like I say, I don't pay for my own production, but like, I haven't had any training in production, and I managed to learn it all off YouTube. And I've managed to make, like, I've got 11 million streams on Spotify from being self-taught. So like, you can easily self-teach yourself on how to do all this stuff and not have to pay all this money, but there's an investment of time into production. So that all of this stuff is kind of simple to do. And a lot of this chat has gone over my head because I generally don't understand what's going on or understand what's happening. I literally just make music with people that I love making music with and release it, and it's working. I get to collaborate with amazing artists like Shireen, who's in the chat. Like, I get to work with her. She's incredibly talented, and I get to put her on a pedestal, and like, I get to bring her up. And my whole thing is, how can I make a collaborative, kingdom-focused music industry that pays people well, gives people fair shares and fair splits? All these people that I'm working with are doing all this stuff, and this industry is moving that way. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Like, I haven't got a clue what's going on in half the time with this chat, because all of this stuff is like, goes way over my head. And like, it's none of this is like, I don't know what metadata is. Like, I don't get paid on radio. Radio is not really a thing over here. Like, I don't get paid on BBC. Like, it doesn't make that much money. I try and focus on the things that do make money and do have an impact and do get into places. So
Well, it's interesting that there's a different perspective, because I always like to have that kind of spectrum of views, and it's always interesting to see a different perspective in terms of you've just done everything yourself, you've trained yourself, and obviously you're getting the results, and which is great. I don't know if everyone has the capacity or capability to do that, but I think that's really commendable that you've been able to learn all of that and do that yourself.
I mean, even like I've got someone who works with a producer constantly, and he just sent me a voice note going, I used to pay $80 a release, but now that we collaborate and work together, we both like working with each other. Now he doesn't pay, and he's managed to build up a successful career out of that. He doesn't pay what, for production or for what? No, he doesn't pay for his production, because he used to pay this guy just for beats and then some production. It's a guy called I'm Rescued, and now he works with works with a producer, and his last song, Patience, is on 700,000 streams, all of this stuff is doing well.
So that was the point I was making earlier when I said if the agreement can be made at the start, where based on the splits, whether it's on songwriting or mechanicals, then the fee could be negotiated. Because that was one of the things I was saying, somebody advised me earlier. If somebody's coming in with everything, or they've got their music all written out, or whatever it is that you're contributing, whether it's the artist or the producer, that could actually give way to negotiate the fee to not exist, or to negotiate the fee to be reduced. But if the split could be along the songwriting, mechanics, PPL, then that could be an argument, as Paul has said. And that's something I was talking about earlier.
And I think there's a misconception that spending way more money will mean that your song will do way better. It doesn't. I've seen from my own eyes, and in my own independent industry that I'm in, that's not true. I've got someone who makes all their beats in Spotify's own app. I can't remember what it's called. It's their own music studio, pays £10 a month, uses their own loops, produces all their own vocals in that thing, and again gets playlisted by Spotify constantly. You can do it on GarageBand, and if your songwriting is good enough and the production is clean enough, it will still go places.
Yeah. I think the other thing to factor in is the genre. So if you're doing it in the box, I think Gozi mentioned this earlier, if it's in the box, it's all in the computer, then it's easier, it's more straightforward. But I'd be surprised if you could get musicians and BVs and band, because of specific genres that require all of those to be in place. I'd be surprised if you could get away with, not spending money to do that. But as you say, Paul, if you're able to do it in the box, then by all means, I think I'd love to be able to do that myself, but I don't think I'm there yet. That would be definitely a dream, to be able to produce stuff myself. So do you play instruments as well, or you just produce, you just do beats and then you get?
No, I play all the instruments. I'm a drummer first and foremost. I session drum for people. I play keys, I play guitar, I play bass. I play all the instruments.
Oh wow, you're like a Jacob Collier.
So I play all the instruments on the stuff, and if there's stuff I can't do, then I'll pay someone to do it for me. But even then, it's only I'm only paying a session musician for a small part on doing a solo or something. Most of the time I'm doing it myself.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the thing. I think somebody mentioned in the chats as well that essentially if artists wanted to save, because at the end of the day, artists also can look for opportunities to save, could be to learn an instrument, whether it's to learn to play guitar, learn to play keyboard, even if it's just putting out an acoustic project, you could do that by learning to play guitar. I picked up piano in 2020, and then I just never followed through because everyone was at home. But that's definitely something to take on, learning an instrument, and then possibly learning to create your own beats as well, and potentially learning to produce your own music, or at least even if you don't do the entire thing, your contribution could reduce how much you potentially may need to pay the producer in the end. So that could be something to think about as well. That could be definitely something to take away for those who have the capacity and the capability, to learn some new skills and kind of dive into the production space as well. Because I think it's great if you're an artist, if you can produce to an extent some of the stuff that you do, or at least be actively involved in the production process where you can. So the final question I was going to, which I've kind of asked already. So I was going to go to you, Paul. One do and one don't. I think we've kind of got the do, which is do not spend too much money if you don't need to. So but I'll let you say it in your own words. What would be one do and one don't that you could suggest to artists?
Like I say, I'm not in this line of work, so I got no clue.
No, I mean from your experience as an artist is what I meant.
I just work I do stuff over email, so I don't know, send me the files and I'll send it you back, and then don't record with your iPhone microphone.
Yeah. Okay, moving on to Gozi.
I think for me, it'll be very simple. Do come with an open mind and don't approach it with a closed mind. It's literally that simple. I think that because, especially when you're working with a team, things can move a certain direction and move slightly away from what you were thinking about it, how you were thinking about it, or how you planned it in your mind. But if you have an open mind all the time, then when things move, you can probably see the benefit of maybe what that move might do for the song. And sometimes some of the most amazing things in songs and productions that I've done in the past sometimes have come from mistakes. So so like coming with an open mind at all times helps. This is in the creative process. Leaving business out of it. And yeah, I think that would really help, go a long way. And also, actually, I would say do come prepared.
Very important.
Do come prepared creatively. Do come prepared creatively. If you're an artist and you're singing, at the end of the day, it's like taking a picture. I always say it's like taking a snapshot of how you look. When you go for a photo shoot, you always want to look cool, no matter who you are. You get your clothes and get that ready. You do makeup if you're into that stuff. Do your hair, whatever, and you want to present your best self. So that's do come prepared, and that helps.
Definitely. That's a great one. And the don't.
Like same thing. Don't
come on prepared.
Don't come prepared. Don't come with a closed mind. Literally, it's literally that simple, because it's a journey, and no matter how you do it, whether you do it the way Paul has said it, or you bring in a large team on board, you always want to be prepared and have an open mind at all times. So no matter what that is, you always have to be there, and with an open mind, you're open to learning new things. You're open to making sure that you're giving your best to the track, because at the end of the day, when you create music, you're creating it for other people. So even if whether you do it all yourself or you do it with a team, you're creating for other people and you want them to enjoy it. You have to make sure you're giving your all and putting your all into it.
Cool. Yeah. Jude, one do and one don't, or even more if you have more.
I've got a question. Someone just sent it to me. I'll ask you guys after.
All right.
It's an interesting one.
Okay, let's hear the question. Hear the question, because.
Can I do my do and don't first?
Okay, do that.
If you don't have a song, don't look for a producer yet. So for me, having a song means that you can sing it at church, you can sing it at home with your parents, and it just sounds good. It sounds okay. It's something you like. Sometimes you have people coming in, they've just got words and ideas. You can do that, but then it ends up costing you more. It takes more time. So, and when a song is almost like it's a song, because sometimes we've heard songs that we like and we never heard the production or the record at church or whatever. So make sure that you have a song first, something that you yourself can sing along to, or whenever you start singing and people are like, oh, that's nice, who sang it or whatever. So was that my do or don't? I think that was my don't.
That was your do. You said come prepared. It was a do. You said come prepared.
Okay.
Oh, have a song. Sorry, you said have a song is what you said. Have a song. Yeah.
Have a song.
Yeah.
And then one other one, I don't know if it's a do or don't, but I think have a very good relationship with your producer, because some of these things we've spoken about, if you have a relationship, it kind of just makes things easier in terms of the financial aspect and talking about whatever. Just be friends and don't look at them as a hired hand, or try go there to say, yeah, right, I'm paying you, so this is what I want. This is what I expect from you and all that. No, know that you're collaborating. It's a transaction. The person is giving you their time, and that you're giving money and also giving your vision, or however it works out. So that's my do and don't, I guess. So I had a question. Someone just sent that to me. saying, is it all right to have non-Christians? Is it all right for producers to have non-Christians play on records? So I think I'll ask you guys that question.
Is it okay to have non-Christian Chinese? Is my answer.
Say that again?
Is it okay to have non-Christian Chinese food? Because the question he's asking is it okay to have non-Christians play on a project? So the question someone is asking is it okay to have non-Christians play on a project? And my question is it okay to have non-Christian Thai food?
Yeah, but okay, cool. Well, all right. My only thing about that though is obviously it depends on what you're trying to achieve, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you know, you can get anybody to play anything, but the thing about music, my experience of music is a blank canvas, and it transports a message. So if you're just doing like, you know, like just generic music, then great, you can get anybody to play on it. If you're doing worship music and you want it to transport that message of worship, then ideally you kind of want everybody to be of the same disposition. Be, you know, the Bible says that can two walk together unless they are agreed. Mm-hmm. You know, so you kind of want to be agreed. You kind of don't want to be you know, doing like a worship song, writing a worship song or producing a worship song, and then you have like just somebody who doesn't understand what's happening, like, you know, come and perform on that. Because for me personally, that's just the way it is. Like, you know, I'll rather, if I'm doing a reggae track, I'll rather get somebody who understands the culture,
correct,
of the music,
correct,
that I'm producing, and that's just the way it is. So I don't just pick and choose anybody to do anything. Yep. You know, I've been fortunate to work in quite different genres, and I've realized that not everybody can hang in every genre.
Absolutely.
Because you need to understand the culture.
Mm-hmm.
So can you get a non-Christian to play on a Christian track? The question is, do they understand the culture?
Or what is
because it's a belief. Yeah. It's a belief. It's a belief system. When you're creating Christian music, at the end of the day, we're creating music that's transporting a belief system.
So should artists not get their songs mixed and mastered in Abbey Road?
Like I said, my preference is always to go for people who understand like the culture. So if you decide like you want to do, I mean, it's a belief system. My preference is always to, if I get someone who understands that, it affects how they approach it. It affects the conversations that we have. It doesn't mean that because there's a technical side to music, right? So like the technical side, anybody can do it. Anybody can do the technical side to music. And as long as you play the right notes and put the right frequencies, the stuff is put together. But when we're going in the way where we're like, okay, cool, actually, I would rather, which is a preference of get someone who understands what I do, how I do it. And it's a relationship, right? And is understanding that. Then the preference is, for me, is always going to be someone who understands the culture. So when I say certain things and I use certain references, they get it immediately. So it's not necessarily that nobody can do it, but it's about what's your preference and how would you prefer to work. And my preferred way of working is to work well with people who always understand my point of reference, and kind of makes it easier.
I think also something to consider is it could be a way of reaching out to the non-Christians in the team. So I genuinely, personally, my personal view, I wouldn't discount a person from working on my projects if they weren't Christians, because they could be hearing the song and it could be ministering to them as well. They could come to know Christ through actually working on a project that they weren't Christian. I mean, I don't know how many of you are watching, there's a TV series called The Chosen, which is a chronicle, it's a I think it's going to have eight parts at a point, but it's basically chronicling Christ's life and the disciples' lives and telling their story from a very interesting perspective. And it's on Game of Thrones level. It's really at that kind of, of that kind of caliber. And not everyone on the cast is Christians. And sometimes they show some behind the scenes clips of people who are in the extras. And as part of being, in a certain episode or shooting a certain scene, the reality of that particular scripture that they're depicting becomes true to them, and they actually give their lives to Christ, or they come to know Christ, or Christ becomes even more real to them by virtue of being a part of the project when they're not even Christian. So my viewpoint is not so much to dismiss people because they're not Christians from being as much as I'd love to have everyone who works on my project be a Christian, I feel like it's also a way of reaching out to them, because at the end of the day, if I wanted to have a string quartet, right, and I went to get some people from an orchestra, chances are they probably won't be Christians. They might be Christians, but chances are they probably won't. And I'm going to want them to play or whatever. So I'm not discounting anyone's response. I'm trying to consolidate all the responses to say, ideally it would be great if we could, but then at the end of the day, it could also be a way of reaching out. And in certain cases, you may not even be able to get a Christian for a certain instrument or for certain requirements that you have on the project, and you just have to work with what you have. So the comments are going ballistic, by the way.
So I've used non-Christians on my stuff.
Yeah.
And it's been fine.
I'm sure it has.
So I've used session musicians to do. So the trumpet solo in Brighter is done by just some guy I found on Fiverr. Same with. Oh, there was another thing. I've got loads of stuff from Fiverr just because.
Oh yeah, I can actually attest to that. I can attest
cheap
to
session musicians who can just do other bits and pieces. But I'd send it to them, and they have in some cases, I want them, like what you're saying, they have a better understanding of how a solo sounds in a certain thing of music. So I send it to them, and they give me back a solo, which has gone on to help other people encounter God.
Yeah.
People aren't asking on a song, is that trumpet guy a Christian? They don't know. I told everyone now. I didn't ask him. It's I just wanted a good trumpet player, so I got a good trumpet player who cost not a lot of money. To do it. So when people are listening to your song, they're not going down into that level of detail into who's a Christian, who's not a Christian. So.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's subjective.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
So
yes.
Can I make
Jude.
a point on that thing?
Don't lose that thought, Gozi, because I know you wanted to say something as well. Yeah, Jude, go.
I think I understand where both sides are coming from. You see what Gozi is saying. There are people, if we want to get into the spirit aspect of things, who come with a bad spirit, right? Spiritually, and if they're sitting on your music or they're part of your BVs or whatever, you have a problem for life. As long as their voice is in there, if we want to talk spiritually, and it happens, if they're coming from a certain genre of music that's, let's say, satanic or whatever it is, and they might be singing your lyrics or playing whatever, but in their mind or in their hearts, they put in something on there that we cannot sonically hear it, but spiritually, if it's there, I'm not trying to be, over spiritualize things, but yeah, it becomes a bit of a problem. So that's where I understand Gozi's point that we all need to have an understanding. It would be nice to pray before a session and pray after, and everybody goes home safe, and we know that okay, we meet each other in churches or whatever. It would be nice, but at the same time, like Paul is saying, you're not always gonna find musicians, Christian musician, playing whatever. So sometimes, I think Sarah, you said as well, it's good to evangelize with your music. It's good to play with people, meet up and be like that. But on the record, I reckon as an artist, you have to be a little bit more careful with that as an artist, because you're it's almost like you're writing a book, you're writing a script, and the characters you put in there kind of define the book in the end goal, if you get what I mean.
Definitely, that makes sense. That's a valid point. Gozi, you were also going to add to that.
Yeah, no, what I was gonna say is, when it comes to a lot of the things we do, there is no hard and fast rule, right? A lot of it is when it comes down to it comes to a place of a preference. It comes to your place of, and that preference might come from a place of certain place of understanding, of certain place of walking. So your preference might come from the place that you want to be. You're intentionally doing it so you can outreach, or how get music to outreach. So, if that's your place, then great, fantastic. Your preference might also come from a place of, because like what Jude just outlined here, you're creating a certain sound, and you're very protective about who collaborates on that particular track. So I don't think it's not necessarily an alienation thing. Is just a thing about understanding what you were trying to do, So Paul, you made a point, like, yeah, for sure. Like at the end of the day, music is, if people like your music, they buy your music. Nobody's asking who played on it. But and on the other hand, it's still ultimately down to personal preference. So I don't want anyone to leave here or listen to this later on and think that, oh no, I can't use this, or no, I must do this. There's no right way. You just have to have your own personal understanding, your own personal conviction. And if you're creating music of a certain ilk, and that's what the Lord has said you should do, ultimately it's his kingdom we're creating for, right? And if God says, I want you to get all unbelievers to do it, then that's what it is, because he has a reason why he's probably asked you to do that, and he will lead you to those people. And if God says, no, actually with this one I want you to do this, then it's for me personally, it's his, I respond to his instruction. And that's been my journey. I've done so many different things, worked with so many different people, but I respond to his instruction now, because I know that ultimately it's not the money you spend on the track, it's not who you use on the track, but it's God breathing on the tracks that makes the track do what they do. You know what I mean? So these are all great conversations and everything, but I think what key thing for me is for me to round up my side of things is to make sure that you remember that, especially if you're creating Christian stuff, it's all about what God says you should do. And if he breathes on the track and he's happy with the track, and you have that your relationship with him, and he's saying, good, my son, good, my daughter, great, then great, you're good. It doesn't actually really matter what anybody says, what anybody thinks, what anybody else's methodology. Actually, it's as long as it pleases him. And for me, that's where I sit. So just thought I would just bring some balance.
Definitely. Definitely. And I think it's interesting, because that's a really good question to kind of wrap today up and lead us to what I'd love to kind of summarize the conversation with, which is, it's important in all of these processes, in all of these discussions, in all the negotiations, from creating through to finishing, to involve the Holy Spirit, because we're Christians, we're, Christian musicians, Christian creatives. We have a bigger mandate than just creating content. It's ministry for us. So just to kind of wrap everything up, we need to invite the Holy Spirit into our processes, into our sessions, into our songwriting, into our conversations, into our relationships. It's all about him. It's all for him. So we need to involve him in everything that we do. So before we finish, I just want you guys to tell everyone where they can find you. I know, Jude, you do a lot of content creation. You're a creative director. You do events. It'd be nice for people to know where they can get you for stuff, and equally for production. Likewise, Gozi, Paul, I know you don't necessarily produce for people, but people might have questions about what to, what kind of things to learn, to look out for, what kind of skills to, to gather, to do their own things independently. So you guys have very unique skill sets, which is quite cool. So if you could just let everyone know where they can get you on socials, that would be great as well. So I'll start with Jude.
For me, it's just New Rivers TV. So that's just New Rivers TV. That's a website, and also on Instagram. So
that's at New Rivers TV,
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And Gozi?
You could go on my website, which is www.goz-i-am.com. And you would find everything you need there. If you need to send me an email, you can send it from there. If you want to connect on social media, you can also connect with me from that side. Everything you need will be on that site.
So that's goz-i-am.com.
Yes, Goziam.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Paul.
Official Wyld spelt wrong music, so WYLD on everything.
Okay, so official Wyld music, that's WYLD. And I am Sarah Téibo. You can get me as Sarah Téibo Music on all platforms. I have to say, this has been really engaging. The conversations on YouTube and Facebook, I think mostly YouTube, have been going ballistic in the last hour or so. It's been so insightful. Thank you so much for hanging. I'm hoping that you've been able to take something away from these conversations. We've been going for about 4 weeks now, and it's been really, really, for me especially, and for those who've been watching and giving me feedback, it's been so full of knowledge and information. The sessions, the panelists, the guests have been just fantastic. I just want to say something real quick. If you haven't subscribed to this YouTube channel, Sarah Téibo Music, please do, so you know whenever we're going live. I'm going to carry on for probably another 4 or 5 weeks, after which it would all be over. But I've put everything into a playlist for you. So if you've missed any of the previous sessions, just go onto my YouTube, Sarah Téibo Music, look for the Equilibrium playlist, and you can watch everything back from the last 4 weeks. Next week, I am going to have a break because I'm going to be at rehearsals for a gig that I'm going for. So I wouldn't be live next Thursday. But by all means, you can play catch up if you've missed previous episodes, or you can watch this today's episode back if you want to. But we'll be back the week after next. And one of the things that we talked about very briefly is what I'm hoping we can touch on in a couple of weeks, which is around publishing. That is a topic that's very mysterious, that most of us don't know much about. So I'm hoping that we can unpack that and learn a bit more on that theme as well. So thank you so much for hanging with us, guys, on Facebook and YouTube. Please, 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 if you know a creative that could benefit from these conversations, share this video. I'm all about sharing knowledge because I feel like there's so much more that we can learn. This is just kind of scraping the surface. And thank you so much to Jude, to Gozi, for Paul, for joining us today. I hope you have a great night rest. Stay safe, everyone, and speak to you again soon.
Okay, guys.